Welcome back, everybody. In this chapter that we're going to enjoy, Lizzy is back in the picture, and we are going to learn a lot of information. So, Kat, wouldn't you suggest I pay attention in this chapter?
I was just going to say the exact same thing. Pay attention now. There's a lot of details in this chapter.
There are. So we're going to also pull some things back together for you. So let's take a listen, and then we'll chat when we come back. Chapter 26. Lizzy woke up but didn't open her eyes. She pulled the covers up under her chin and felt the softness of the quilt. She was still wondering who robbed Peter to pay Paul, and whether one of the bees in the honeybee block was a queen bee. That made her remember her dream, where Pearline Beasley turned into a bee, and Fluffs got mad at her and put her in a jar. It suddenly dawned on Lizzy that it was Christmas morning. She turned to see the snow outside the bedroom window, but there wasn't any snow. There wasn't a window. She wasn't at Granny's. She was in an underground house somewhere in a forest far away from home. She looked around the room. Igree had left soft lights burning, and their gentle glow illuminated the comfortable furnishings. Lizzy stretched and yawned. She was amused that her dream seemed so real. She didn't mind. So far, it was turning out to be one of the best dreams she had ever had, and having McDougal with her made it even better. Some things had been a little scary, but it wasn't a nightmare. McDougal heard her stir and raised up on the side of the bed. "Good morning, lassie," he said with a vigorous waggling tail.
"Why, good morning, McDou. Did you have a good sleep? Did you have any dreams about Pearline Beasley?" Lizzy buzzed.
"I had nae sich dreams, but I'm presuming by your inquisitiveness that ye did."
"I did," Lizzy giggled. "Pearline Beasley was a bee. She stole a cherry and made Fluffs mad. Do you think dreams mean anything?"
"I dinna ken aboot the meaning o' dreams, but it sure sounds as if ye had a wild yin." McDougal sniffed the air. "Ach, something smells good. Shall we check it out?" Igree had made a fresh batch of truffles and was already in the midst of his tea ritual when Lizzy and McDougal made their way into the dining room.
"They're piping hot. Help yourself."
Igree set the platter on the table.
"Now don't you for 1 minute let Greta try to convince you that Gabby's truffles are better than mine. Her truffles are very good, but mine are the best."
Igree lowered his voice and added,
"I have a secret ingredient. I've never told a soul what it is, so don't ask."
"What is it?" asked Lizzy.
Now, I just told you it's a secret," replied Igree.
He sat the tea on the table, leaned into Lizzy's ear, and then whispered,
"It's cinnamon."
Greta appeared in the doorway.
"Good morning, Princess. Mr. McDougal, has Igree been prattling on about his truffles? He thinks his are the best because he adds cinnamon."
Lizzy tried not to laugh. She swallowed fast to avoid spitting out her sip of tea.
"Igree's truffles are very good, but you won't find them to be quite as tasty as Gabby's."
Igree took a small framed certificate off the wall and showed it to Lizzy.
"My truffles won first prize at the Starfest Bake-Off," boasted Igree.
Greta helped herself to a truffle.
"Congratulations, Igree. When was that? 82 years ago or something?"
Igree looked at the date on the certificate and did the math.
72,
clarified Igree. Lizzy was delighted as she watched the two of them banter back and forth over truffles. She learned that it was an ongoing tradition in Allaire to brag about your truffles, whether they had ever won prizes or not. Igree and Greta both agreed that it was very difficult to find a bad truffle unless it had been accidentally overbaked or burnt. After breakfast, they moved to the parlor. Lizzy sat in her favorite chair. Igree pulled up a stool and sat down directly in front of her.
"I'm grateful for your patience, Princess," said Igree. "I know you have felt anxious and have been eager to know why we so desperately need your help."
Lizzy nodded.
"Well then, I need to tell you a story about two girls and a broken promise. Igree began the delicate task of telling Lizzy about Beatrice and Calixta. Lizzy had plenty of questions, which Igree answered the best he could. He spoke fondly of Gracella and how she had flown the baby to safety through the tunnel of stars. He explained that such a thing could only be done by a master mage. "What's a mage?" asked Lizzy. "A mage? Well, a mage is anyone who performs some form of magic. Magicians, witches, warlocks, sorcerers, sorceresses, wizards, and enchanters are all mages. A master mage is trained a long time and has the ability to use the most powerful magic. It's very difficult to become a master mage, and it usually takes a long time." "And Gracella, she was the one who took who took the princess through the tunnel of stars?" "Yes, she did," Igree confirmed. Lizzy looked curiously at Greta. "If master mages are the only ones who can fly through the tunnel of stars, that means you must be a master mage too." Greta smiled softly. "I am. I worked hard to become a master mage just so that I could go find you." "Why didn't Gracella come find me?" Lizzy asked. Igree paused as he considered how best to proceed. He cautiously began telling her the story of how Calixta and the Grackles had entered Anza and placed the groaning stone curse on everyone at Castle Hill. When Igree finished, they all sat in silence for a few minutes. Lizzy looked at Greta and was the first to speak. "And you were there? You saw it happen?" Greta nodded. Lizzy couldn't imagine what it would have felt like to witness such a horrible thing. Although she had been impatient to know why Greta had brought her to Allaire, now that she knew the whole story, she was apprehensive and anxious. If what Igree said was true, Calixta had managed to fix it so that the only one who could reverse the curse was the true princess, which ensured that the child would be delivered into Calixta's hands. "Are you going to take me to Calixta?" MacDougall barked. "By Jove, they will no be taking ye to that witch." He jumped up into Lizzy's lap. "No, no, no, we will not do anything of the sort," said Igree. He got up from his chair and squatted on his haunches in front of both Lizzy and MacDougall. "My dear princess, at this very moment, you are the most important and most precious person in the entire kingdom of Allaire. We want Castle Hill to be restored, but we will not give you to Calixta in order for that to happen. Our goal is to keep you safe. The Mage Council believes it is possible to reverse the curse and defeat Calixta, but it can't be done without you." Lizzy remembered the swarm of grackles that had flown over Lake Road yesterday, and now realized why Greta had been so cautious and protective. "What do I have to do?" asked Lizzy. "Well," said Igree, "first we need to get you to Anza to meet with the council. The High Mage will explain the plan. Then you will have to decide if you are willing to help." "Are you and Greta on the council?" Lizzy asked. "We are," replied Igree. Greta stood up and motioned for Lizzy to follow. She went over to the old portrait that Lizzy had studied the night before. "This was taken many years ago, when Igree was the High Mage." "Igree was the High Mage?" "Indeed, he was," replied Greta. "Igree was a wonderful High Mage. He was High Mage longer than anyone in the history of the kingdom. These are all officers who were once on his council." Lizzy puzzled. "The bear and the raven are mages too?" "Not only mages, but master mages, and they were loved and respected by everyone in the kingdom. Igree is the only one in the picture who is still with us. The others have transitioned to the celestial realm. Igree won't tell you, but—" Greta leaned into Lizzy and whispered, He's the most powerful wizard in all of Alair." Lizzie's eyes got big and her jaw dropped. "You're a wizard?" Igree shrugged, blew her a kiss, then snapped his fingers. A rainbow of sparkling stars began floating down over her, which made her laugh. "The bear is Burton," Greta continued. "He served as High Mage after Igree. His son Baron is on the council now." "But he's a bear. Bears are mean and scary." "Maybe where you come from, but Baron? Why, he's as gentle as a summer breeze. I think you will like him a lot." Lizzie wasn't convinced. Bears had big teeth, big paws, and big claws, but since so many things were different here, she decided to wait and see for herself. "Who's the woman?" asked Lizzie. "That's Gorva. She was a wonderful mage, but she was also a gifted healer. She eventually chose medicine over magic and ran an apothecary called the Hyssop and Sage. It's still there, but it has new owners. She lived to be exactly 100 years old, and she was working in her shop on the day that she died." Lizzie studied Gorva's long silver hair and once again admired the pendant she was wearing. Greta drew Lizzie's attention to the raven. "That's Ravel. He was High Mage after Burton and served for 22 years. For the sake of both Lizzie and Igree, Greta didn't say any more. Lizzie didn't need to know how Ravel had died. At least, not yet. "And who's the man with the beard?" "That's Cedric," replied Igree. "He was one of the most brilliant master mages in the history of the kingdom. He was born to be a mage, and he would have become High Mage, but his father was the king. And when his father died, Cedric became king and, well..." Igree looked at Greta, who shook her head. "Well..." "Well, what?" asked Lizzie. "Well..." Igree searched for the words. "Well, his wife died unexpectedly. His grief sent him into a place of darkness, the kind of darkness that comes from deep despair. He never recovered from it." "He must have loved her very much," Lizzie suggested. Igree pointed to the autographed photo of the Ice Angels. "He did," said Igree. "That was her, his wife, the one in the middle." Lizzie admired her beauty. "What was her name?" "Oris. Her name was Oris. He was so distraught over losing her that he did some things he shouldn't have done. The choices he made are what ultimately led us to the situation we are in. But he's gone now, and what is done is done. And speaking of done, if you will agree to help us, we should make our way to Anza. We don't have much time. Will you meet with the Mage Council? We must reverse the curse before the moon sets tomorrow night, or it will be too late." Lizzie was quiet for a moment as she pondered her situation. She thought about what she had been told and was surprised that her imagination could create such a fantasy. She still felt safe. McDougal was with her, and she liked Greta and Igree. She assumed at some point she would wake up and it would be Christmas. She also had a small argument with herself over the fact that this all seemed very real. Cracks in her dream theory were starting to show. "I will go if you promise me that when it's over, I can go home." "I promise," said Igree. Well, who would have thought we had a trifle contest going on, that would have been such a big deal, right?
There's always got to be some kind of contest when cooking is involved, I think.
You know, I'm laughing at Igree's really old championship, right? Because I have to go back to my high school days and go, oh yeah, I'm still living in the past. I have an award from way back when.
A major award.
Yeah, yeah. A Christmas Story, a major award. I hope some people will get that reference.
Yeah, exactly.
We are pulling things together now. So characters that you didn't know who or what they are starting to come into play. we're starting to understand things. We don't necessarily know the timeline of it all, but simply because the portrait is rather aged, we can assume that it's been a while. And so I hope that people, sometimes this might be one of those chapters to go back and review some of the things that are in that particular portrait, because it all plays into where we're headed.
Yeah, I totally agree. As a point of reference, I can remember, it reminds me though, when I go home and chat with my mom and I see an old photograph and they tell me the stories of who those people were and what they did and the lifestyles they had. And I love that kind of genealogy history stuff. And I'm glad that she gets to experience a little bit of that here, even though she still thinks it's a dream.
Absolutely. Well, this is not for us. This is not the last book. This is the first book. And the quilt, which is an inspiration in the story, the quilt, we have the quilt pattern book coming out. I'm encouraging people to watch the video on the quilt fabric reveal and the quilt reveal. I'll have that link in the comments. But also, I'm just thinking about the future novels, the spin-offs from this particular novel. And one of the things that you just said, the photograph, in our discussions, you have an old family photograph with Granny and her sister. And you're talking, I don't want to spoil the fun, but you have her sister kind of shrouded at a wedding or something, and that can spin a whole nother story. So I'm looking forward to how this comes forward. And if you're enjoying Lizzy Albright, just know that we're on a bandwagon that's going to keep rolling down the road for a while. Yay?
Amen.
All right, we'll be back. We'll be back with chapter 27.